terse, tense calm has been shattered along Israel's northern frontier. Over the past weeks, what was once a familiar, if fragile, pattern of rockets, mortars and drones has been punctuated by claims that cross a new threshold, the use of battlefield ballistic missiles. Multiple reports now allege that Hezbollah launched a Scud-type missile toward territory controlled by Israel, the second such claim since April. If those reports are accurate, this is not merely an expansion of rhetoric, it is a potentially seismic shift in the character of the confrontation along the Israel-Lebanon line. To understand why the allegation matters so much, it helps to step back and look at what a Scud is. The name refers to a family of Soviet-designed short-range ballistic missiles, first developed from wartime rocket research and fielded in the 1950s. Over decades, the basic design was widely exported, copied and upgraded. Later variants, commonly referred to in open literature as Scud-C and Scud-D, incorporated better guidance and longer ranges. These are liquid-fueled rockets launched from mobile transporter reactor launchers, making them harder to detect before they fire. In some hands, the platform was adapted to carry heavier conventional warheads, and states built missiles capable, in principle, of delivering dangerous chemical and nuclear payloads. Those are extremes. In most recent conflicts, the most consequential factor has been range and accuracy, not armament type. Even a conventionally armed Scud derivative can impose a powerful psychological and military effect if it reaches high-value targets. What makes the recent reports noteworthy is the suggestion that a non-state actor may now be operating that class of weapon. For weeks, defense commentators across the region had been focused on drone waves, rocket salvos, and the cat and mouse of short-range exchanges. The leap from rockets and crude UAV munitions to guided ballistic missiles changes the calculus. Ballistic web. Bombs arrive fast, follow a programmed arc, and, depending on their guidance, upgrades can be aimed at fixed military sites. They are also more difficult to defeat with the layer of defenses designed primarily for slower, lower altitude threats. A month earlier in April, Israeli outlets and analysts flagged what they described as an unprecedented event, an alleged Scud-type launch from Lebanon toward a site on Israel's Mediterranean coast known in defense, reporting for missile testing and air defense evaluation. Those reports suggested the projectile could be a modernized Scud derivative, possibly sourced through older Syrian inventories. Official assessments at the time stopped short of firm confirmation, but the idea that such a capability might be present in Lebanon or within reach of forces operating in the area has now become part of the wider narrative, and the tensions did not remain abstract. Late in the month, the Israel Defense Forces reported a serious and deadly exchange. Inside southern Lebanon, on April 30th, the IDF said Hezbollah launched explosive-laden drones at positions where Israeli troops were deployed. One strike, the military said, killed 19-year-old Sergeant Liam Ben Hammer of the Golani Brigade's 13th Battalion. A second soldier was wounded in the same incident. Hezbollah claimed responsibility for the attack and said its drones had targeted armored vehicles. In other skirmishes that day, Israeli forces reported 2 more soldiers moderately wounded in separate strikes, and a rocket from Lebanon was said to have struck an open area in northern Israel. In the hours before and after those incidents, the skies and border zones came alive. The IDF described a wave of drones originating from southern Lebanon, an onrush that Israeli air defenses sought to stop in mid-flight. The military said it intercepted at least 4 incoming drones and that a 5th remained under assessment. One drone, the IDF reported, slipped through and crossed into Israel airspace, triggering warning sirens in a northern coastal community. Several others were downed over Lebanese territory before they could pose a greater threat. At the same time, Israeli aircraft struck targets in southern Lebanon, hitting vehicles and residential structures in multiple villages, according to Lebanon's state-run national news agency, which reported fatalities in several locations without clarifying whether those killed were combatants or civilians. Amid the back and forth, the IDF also issued evacuation warnings for residents of several southern Lebanese villages ahead of further strikes targeting what it described as Hezbollah positions. As with so much in this environment, the human costs and the strategic signals blur together. An evacuation order is both a protective measure for civilians and a way of preparing the battlefield for follow-on operations. The IDF released footage, it said, showed the destruction of a 140-meter-long Hezbollah tunnel, an image intended to underline the tangible results of its targeting campaign. Through all of this, an alarming detail keeps resurfacing. The mention of older, longer-range ballistic systems. The mention of older, longer-range ballistic systems. A Scud-type projectile, even an upgraded derivative, represents a qualitative change. Unlike shorter-range rockets that are often fired from fixed or makeshift launch points, mobile ballistic systems can be moved, hidden and prepared for single high-impact shots. Their deployment raises thorny questions about intelligence, interdiction and deterrence. Where did the missile come from? How was it emplaced? Who in the chain of command authorized its use? Who in the chain of command authorized its use? And crucially, if such weapons are now in play, how will Israel respond to the elevated threat? From a defensive perspective, the challenges are considerable. Israel's air defenses are layered and sophisticated, built to contend with an array of threats from low-altitude shrapnel rockets to higher-speed, higher-altitude ballistic rockets, but intercepting a ballast. TIC missile requires rapid detection, accurate tracking, and interceptors capable of engaging a high-velocity threat in the upper atmosphere. Mobile launchers on the ground can disperse and camouflage their movements. They can be fired from rural hinterlands and then be withdrawn before retaliatory strikes arrive. If Hezbollah or any other actor is fielding even a small number of such launches, it will force a recalibration of surveillance and preemption strategies. Equally important are the pathways by which these systems might have proliferated. Decades of conflict in the region have created reservoirs of older hardware. Syrian stockpiles, for example, have been cited in reporting as a likely source for various missile types over many years. Weapons can move across borders through clandestine networks, through state complicity, or through battlefield capture and resale. When cold, state-level arsenals leak into regular hands, the result can be a sudden and destabilizing shift in capability. The political dimension cannot be separated from the military one. Hezbollah is deeply embedded in Lebanon's social and political fabric. Any escalation between it and Israel reverberates across Lebanese civilian life, feeding existing humanitarian strain and complicating the actions of the Lebanese state. For Israel, the possibility of ballistic attacks against facilities on its territory or against forces operating near the border raises the prospect of more intensive operations deep inside Lebanon, with all the attendant risks of civilian harm and regional friction. Still, at the tactical level, the events reported over these days show a pattern of tit-for-tat engagements rather than a decisive climax. Rockets and drones are launched, some are intercepted, others land in open areas without causing casualties. Airstrikes hit claimed Hezbollah positions, warnings are issued. The exchanges are punctuated by casualties on both sides and by claims and denials. Each side seek to demonstrate capability without triggering an escalation it cannot control. Yet the presence of a claimed ballistic launch adds a new variable to the equation. The threshold between harassment and full-blown escalation narrows when the weapons used can reach larger military targets with greater precision. In practical terms, that means more strain on both intelligence and diplomacy. Early warning systems must detect not only the flight of individual projectiles, but also the emergence of logistic chains, storage sites and transport routes that could sustain further ballistic deployments. International actors with influence over Lebanon and Syria find themselves in a delicate spot, pressing for de-escalation without appearing to isolate one domestic political actor at the expense of another. For neighbouring states, the quiet fear is that a miscalculation in a local skirmish could cascade into a larger conflagration. The human stories remain immediate and raw. Families on both sides of the border live with the sound of sirens, the uncertainty of evacuation orders, and the very real possibility that the next strike will shatter lives. The death of a young soldier in a drone strike, as reported at the end of April, crystallizes the cost. The loss reverberates through military units and communities and becomes another data point in the ledger of a conflict that is increasingly costly in blood and infrastructure. We also have to consider the symbolic aspects. The reported use of an older generation ballistic missile by a non-state actor would be a demonstration that technological thresholds can be crossed not merely by state arsenals, but by organized militias acting within or across state borders. That psychological effect, the idea that even sophisticated targets are not wholly safe, has strategic weight far beyond the physical damage inflicted. For the moment, many details remain unclear. Official confirmations are limited and different parties differ. In accounts of the same events, where fatalities are reported, the identities and statuses of those killed are sometimes disputed, where missiles are alleged, forensic evidence and independent verification are often slow to arrive. In the darkness between claim and confirmation, the risk of misreading intent grows, and with it, the chance of an unnecessary widening of hostilities. What is certain is that the conflict environment has become more complex. Airspace over Israel's northern frontier is no longer a two-dimensional battlefield of drones and rockets. The spectre of ballistic trajectories complicates both defense and response. Commanders must weigh the military benefits of retaliatory strikes against the political and humanitarian costs. Civilians must weigh the disruptive burden of temporary displacements and the fragile mechanisms that have until now limited escalation are being tested. As night follows day, every intercepted drone and every downed projectile is both a tar. CTT success and a reminder of fragility. Interceptions buy time and space, but they do not remove the underlying tensions that produce these exchanges. The presence or alleged presence of Scud-type missiles invites a deeper conversation about arms proliferation, about the security vacuum that allows sophisticated hardware to circulate, and about the diplomatic tools, or lack thereof, to manage and reduce the risk of wider confrontation. Looking ahead, the variables to watch are the frequency of these launches and the precision that accompanies them. A single isolated incident can be treated as a provocation. A sustained campaign of ballistic strikes, or even the credible threat of one, can alter deterrence calculations and make restraint more difficult to sustain. For now, the exchanges remain episodic but escalating in capability. The region is watching to see whether this moment will be a temporary spike in hostilities or the beginning of a new and more dangerous phase of conflict. In the hours and days to come, independent verification of the more serious allegations, including any ballistic missile launches, will be critical. For journalists, analysts, and policymakers, the challenge is to pass the stream of claims and counterclaims, holding fast to verifiable facts while situating events within the broader arc of regional dynamics. For people living along the border, the calculus is simpler and harsher. Prepare for the next siren, heed evacuation notices, and hope that the next exchange does not cross an irreversible line. The confrontation in northern Israel and southern Lebanon has been volatile for decades, punctuated by intense episodes and uneasy lulls. What has shifted in recent weeks is not just the tempo, but the type of threat being discussed and allegedly deployed. That shift is why these reports of a Scud-type missile, of drone waves that pierce defenses, of evacuation orders and tunnel strikes matter far beyond their immediate physical effects. They signal a possible change in the tools and stakes of the conflict. For audiences trying to make sense of it all, the headline is clear. The frontier has become more dangerous and the room for controlled, limited, and the room for controlled, limited actions has narrowed. Whether those who hold the levers of force will exercise restraint, or whether a new and more destructive chapter will open, remains to be seen. Until then, the border will remain tense, the skies charged, and every siren a reminder of how